So in this video, I want to talk about why I actually don't like Deathless mode, and it has nothing to do with the challenge aspect of Deathless. I would actually prefer it to be like an official game mode so that people actually know about it. So I'm gonna go over some points. Like I have a little list of reasons as to why I don't like Deathless. All right, so the first thing as to why I don't like it is it's an unofficial challenge. It's unofficial in that when you select the game difficulty, there's just easy, normal, hard, and I think very easy. And most people will assume hard is the hardest difficulty. So it's like the game does have it in place, like this system in place to check for if anything dies, and you do get a reward for doing it. But it feels very hidden, unofficial, and I actually don't care for that. The more you play the game, the easier Deathless becomes. Like on New Game Plus, I would argue Deathless is not even hard at all because you have access to so much nonsense that unless you're adding additional restrictions, it's just not even really a challenge. But I don't like that it's like a hidden challenge because me as the player, I can add any hidden challenge I want. I can just determine to do a half unit playthrough where I only run 50% unit size or like team size. That's like the reason why I want it to be official is because it legitimizes it, right? And people actually know about it. Very few players currently even know Deathless is a thing. The game doesn't say it's a thing. It's very hidden. It's very obscure. Maybe in like a few months, most players will know about it, but by then I would argue most players are going to stop playing. So your average casual player has no idea that Deathless is even a thing and that there's like even a reward for it and that it's even worth doing. And also, there's an extreme amount of confusion over how Deathless even works to the point where most people don't even understand that like if green units die, that it loses Deathless for them. Or if like a Piccoletta decoy dies, it doesn't lose Deathless, or that if you die in a mental mock battle, it does or does not lose, like ruin a Deathless playthrough because the game doesn't communicate it. So like one of the reasons why I felt the need to make so many videos on this game is because the game doesn't communicate a lot of things. Like what does blind do? How does accuracy and evasion work? It just does. It just kind of you just get like the result. You don't really understand how these things work until you test them. But that's the first reason. It's unofficial. It's hidden. The second reason I don't like Deathless is most players don't know about it. So if I were to, for example, do YouTube tutorials on how to beat a map on Deathless, I would argue like less than 5% of this game's population even knows what that is. So why would they even bother to care to learn how to do something if they don't even know what it is? And it's so, like, honestly, it's too hidden. There needs to be an additional game mode called Deathless mode that explains the rule set, or it needs to be like how in Fire Emblem Three Houses, when you start a new game, you can put it on maddening, and then there's classic and casual mode. This game needs a second option that explains it to you. That when you run a mission or when you create a new save, it'll be like, what difficulty you want? Okay, hard mode. Do you want to play on Deathless or casual mode? This game needs that. If it had that, then that would change everything, and people would know right out of the gate. They'd be like, what's Deathless mode? Every single player would have been exposed to what Deathless mode is. This game needs that, and I think that it being hidden is actually a mistake. Okay. And then what you would do is you would code Deathless so that if anything dies, you automatically lose the map. Now you know what's at stake. All right. Okay, so most players don't even know about it. The third point is the game poorly communicates why this is a thing to do. So if you actually play the game, I beat the game like 4 times, and then like I saw on Reddit, someone was like, oh yeah, I just finished my Deathless run and I got the Plume of Immortality. And I was like, huh? Deathless run? What the hell is that? You get an item for doing Deathless? Like even I didn't even know, and I had already made, like 20, 30 unit guides by that point for all the basic units, and it's hidden in like a dialogue option with like Lionel or something. You talk to Lionel and he references a great commander would never let any single unit die, or maybe he'd be greatly rewarded for it. It's like that's too cryptic. Like there's so much dialogue in this game. I skipped like 90% of it. In between battles, there's like 10 cutscenes sometimes. It's ridiculous. I have 300 hours in this game skipping cutscenes. Imagine if I didn't skip cutscenes. I would have like 500 hours. I have 300. So it's stupid that it's this hidden. I think that like it's also poorly communicated. This is why literally no one knows what it is except for a few people who like really pay attention to cryptic things like this in JRPGs, which God bless them. But most people are gonna just like. The thing is, when I talk to Lionel, I'm like, cool, a merchant, I'm gonna buy stuff, and I just skip through all of his dialogue because I didn't care. Because I'm trying to buy stuff, I'm trying to play a game. Like when I'm playing chess, I'm not concerned with, oh my god, I need to talk to all these NPCs. Like I just want to play chess. Like I'm not. That's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to like blitz chess online. I'll just like get on a thing and start playing right away because it's just like gameplay. I'm here for the gameplay. I would really love if devs put a thing in called gameplay mode where you don't care about the story or it just like restricts the amount of cutscenes because then you can actually just play the game mostly. But alright, so it's poorly communicated. It's unofficial. Most players don't know about it. The fourth point why I don't like Deathless, the reward is boring. What is the reward? It is a thing that has a 50-50 chance of rezzing a unit on it. That's not remotely interesting at all. It's literally like, oh, you prevented everyone from dying? Well, here's a thing that does that better. After you've already gotten used to preventing things from dying on every single map in order to beat the game. It's a very weird reward. They could have made it something interesting like you regenerate 1 TP per turn. That would be infinitely better. Just something simple like that. I'm sure most players would agree that would be far more interesting. Or even a secret character. If you want people to get interested in Deathless, make it a little bit more obvious and make like a 31st character, or make it like unlock like getting bosses as units or something. I think the reward is just really boring, like the Plume of Immortality. It's just not interesting. Even just a bracelet that regens TP would be drastically more interesting. My fifth point: the game was not designed around Deathless, even though it's possible. So what do I mean by that? So if you've ever played chess, you will almost never win a game of chess without losing material. So losing material is natural in chess. And in a game where you're alternating turns, I think it's more fair to compare this game to chess than Fire Emblem. And what chess does is it forces you to make the strongest move in order to either win enough material where your opponent resigns or to deliver checkmate. So when you lose material, it's not the end of the world. So you use your pieces on the board to achieve a position or a result. In this game, that is also true. However, in the context of a Deathless run, I would actually argue this game wasn't really designed for Deathless based on how quick things die and how combat works in general. It's extremely easy for any mage to just get one-shot by like an enemy archer on high ground from most positions, and this map's a perfect example of that. Like this map, you kind of have to turtle. Now there are like offensive strategies, aggressive strategies you could use on New Game Plus, but on a fresh save, you just lack the resources and the shutdown to like start pushing through the center or flank. You kind of have to just like hold this position back here. I think this is chapter 4 or 5. Because there's an archer on high ground to my right and an archer on like medium ground to my left. I think an archer mage combo pushed the center. So the game seemingly doesn't want you to play it safe, and it seems to want to be more like chess, where you sack material and make plays. And if you're not doing Deathless, then it's a completely different game. That's my other problem too that I'll get into, but I would argue this game's more like chess than Fire Emblem. And the fact that when they shipped the game, they advertised it as it doesn't matter if units die, and they strongly kept saying it doesn't matter if units die. And then there's this secret game mode where it matters if units die. It's like, what are you doing? Like what is the game? It's like an identity issue. I don't mind. I am to some degree like grateful that they do have a harder challenge in there, but I'd rather it be like an official thing, like an option you select, so that people know this is an actual thing, because currently no one knows about Deathless, and the only people that do are hardcore fans of the game, and there are way fewer of those than average people who just picked up the game. So your average person has no idea that this is a thing. And honestly, I don't think this game was designed around Deathless, because some of these maps, like Chapter 8 is a perfect example. Chapter 8, when you're at the dam at night, is super easy for Deathless. Not even remotely a challenge. Extremely easy map. You have tons of space. So easy, I beat it on my first attempt. No one is even close to dying. And then the other Chapter 8, where what is it you're doing? The one that the opposite one. It's either you can do the dam or something else. It's not the Avlor or the Sorcery fight. Those are the ones that are insane. But there's another chapter 8. It was so easy I can't even remember it, to be honest. So there's chapter 8A and chapter 8B that are like so easy, no green units to defend, complete control of the map, virtually put you to sleep because they're so easy. And then there's chapter 8C and chapter 8D where you're either fighting with Avlora or you're fighting against Avlora. And in both instances, you have to defend 2 100 health green units, either archers that are on like high ground or mid ground, or you have to defend these melee units. And it took me a while to beat these missions just because of these units on the board. However, if I were just to beat the game on Deathless, the hilarious thing is if you know what route to take, Deathless is a breeze. So it's like this thing where certain maps, all maps are not equally difficult. Some chapter 8s are drastically harder than others, and this is true for every single map every single map on this game where there's options. One of them is going to be easier, one of them is going to be harder. So if you're going to have like a Deathless mode, it has to be consistently hard. Like you can't have chapter 8 go from being, so easy it's boring to holy crap, these suicidal green NPCs are ruining my Deathless run for 10 attempts. Like you can't, like that's just bad game design, frankly. You have to have your difficulty curve consistent. You can't just have one chapter 8 be drastically harder than other chapter 8s. Now, if you want to make a Deathless run as hard as humanly possible, you could research which chapters are the hardest and then do that, and that's fine. But my point is, Deathless isn't as hard as you think as long as you know which maps to play, and it is harder as long as you play maps that are, more absurd. But the funny thing is, though, with these like low HP green units on like some of these maps, if you're playing the game normally and you don't care about Deathless, these maps aren't hard because those units just die and then you just move on with your life. But then when Deathless is concerned, all of a sudden these low HP units are like the be-all, end-all, make or break the map situation. So the game doesn't even prepare you for a Deathless run at all because by default it trains you, and you have to consider these things in your game developer. The game trains you to not care about death unless you're doing this weird obscure thing, which is an unofficial challenge, which I can impose any unofficial challenge on myself and make a video on it. I could do 50% run. I could do, -2 units. So instead of running 8, you run 6. Like I could do things like that. I could ban certain characters. But then the more obscure and the more specific I'm getting, it's not an official challenge, and most people won't care anyways. So even if you were to want to cover, like here, hey guys, here's my 50% run, I can almost guarantee you that would not get viewership, and no one would care, and very few people would be interested. Especially if I use broken characters, because then it's like, oh, okay, he's just using Medina and Flanagan again. And Flanagan is broken. Now that I've used him enough, I can safely say he's S tier and he's extremely strong. But all right, so it's not designed for Deathless, even though it's possible. Okay, and then another point: sacking in chess for an advantage, and then go over why aggression in chess is more fun. So if you play chess, in my opinion, there's like 2 types of chess players. I'm sure there's more, but from what I've encountered, there's 2 types. There's the fun kind and the boring kind. The fun kind, even if they're really strong players, will also attack, and they'll always attack and set up threats and try to keep things sharp and not trade down material. And then the boring kind will win a pawn and then just keep trading down until they're at just like a king and pawn endgame. Now, I can do well in endgames. I don't have a problem with endgames. But what I have a problem with is just trading down for the sake of trading down. But that's like a different issue. But anyways, the point with aggression in chess is that aggressive moves and sharp lines make the game tense. They make the game interesting. They make the game dynamic and fluid. Whereas, being slower or turtling makes the game less interesting. So Deathless on some maps does force you to be aggressive to save green NPCs. But when it doesn't, you'd be an idiot for being aggressive, because if CC misses, if a Fury misses, if a Heart Stealer misses, or something happens, like a blind misses, which happens a lot, even though it's like 85% success rate, you could die, and then you have to restart the map, because a single unit gets spiked down, and it's a challenge that's more tedious than fun, if that makes sense. So instead of it being like landing a shot Like like the perfect example I can come up with for like skill based things, if it were like a single player game, is if you were to take a game like Tribes, which is where a game where dudes are flying through the air and they like use jetpacks and shit and they're going extremely fast, and you have to lead your target with a projectile and hit them, and you have to kind of like feel out their speed and hit them in in 3D while they're moving very fast, and you have like fractions of a second to make these decisions. This is not a game where it's like purely skill based. It's more of a game where if you know the answers, you win. It's more like a test. Like if I were to have you sit down and play Tribes Ascend and say, "Oh, just shoot the guy in the air," you would miss, like, unless you played a game similar to it, you would miss like most of your shots. You would probably never even kill someone for the first like 20 to 30 hours unless you just like hit them while they're like standing on the ground for a second. You'd find it very difficult and frustrating. In this game, I can literally just show you exactly what to do, and you can beat the game. In chess, to some degree, this is true if someone were to play for you, but the chess is more dynamic and fluid, even though there's like just fewer positions than a game like Triangle Strategy. Triangle Strategy, if you know map tactics, you can beat almost every single map on Deathless easily. For chess, though, as soon as your opponent starts to do something you don't understand or you haven't trained for or you don't recognize, now you have to actually think about what's going on, and it forces your brain to adapt. So in this game, the challenge for Deathless is more of an issue of just map tactics. It's not really an issue of how quickly and well can you respond to the chaos of enemies making good decisions. It's more of these enemies kill you in 2 hits, and there's a lot of them. So I would argue I would rather have I would argue to have better AI instead of more damage. But the easiest thing to do in a game is to add more damage. But anyway, sacking in chess is interesting. It allows for dynamic play. Sometimes you can like sack a queen or sack like a bishop or something to open up a position to attack your opponent's king and then win. And the idea is your pieces are a means to an end to achieve victory. Whereas in this game, on Deathless, you can't sack things, which makes it less dynamic. So like if you could have Roland rush in and 4 dragons, a healer, and then he were to die, but then off of that kill you can get like 2 or 3 more kills, and then now you have a huge advantage, but then you're down like 20 or 30% of your forces. That's more fun to me. But I don't play like that anyways. I usually put tank on Roland and have him be positioned well. But being able to blow out and just like sack pieces to attack, like that's what war is too, right? Like in war, you're never going to have a battle where there aren't losses. That's insane. All right, and then the final point for why I don't like Deathless, I would rather have improved enemy AI, coordination, and enemy abilities. So this would be very hard to design. You would have to give enemies more options. You'd have to make the enemies coordinate things, like maybe an enemy has an ability that puts 1 hit of invincibility on one of their tanks, and then their tank actually has fury. Like, it would be more interesting if the enemies tactically were smarter and had better abilities instead of just hitting really hard. Obviously, that would be hard to do, and I'm sure people would get mad at getting furied all the time. But I would rather it be that than this thing where you have asymmetrical abilities. Like, they deal more damage and have better stats. You have better abilities, and then you have to figure out how to use your better abilities. But it's always going to be harder to do the better AI thing because that's more dev work, whereas increasing damage takes 5 seconds. So yeah, those are all the reasons. Overall, I think it's fine that Deathless is in the game, and I'd rather have a hidden challenge than nothing. But as someone who's done like Guild Wars content where I just like disable like, I don't know, 50% of the game skills by beating some hard content using only an account from Guild Wars factions and not using all the other add-ons to beat some of the hardest content, I can do self-imposed challenges all day. But the problem is people aren't usually interested in them unless they're really cool or compelling, and somehow you get picked up in the YouTube algorithm. Whereas like with Deathless, no one really knows what it is anyways. So like from just like a standpoint of marketing and accessibility, people don't know what it is, which is a problem. Like if I say, hey, I'm doing a Fire Emblem Maddening Classic run, people are like, oh, I know what that is. It's a communication problem. If I say I'm doing a Deathless run in Triangle Strategy, most people will be like, what is Deathless? So yeah, that's it for this video. It's kind of just like an opinion video. I am going to be getting back to the regular scheduled content. But yeah, thanks for checking this out. Definitely like and subscribe, and peace.